Welcome to 1000 PS TV. Welcome to the second edition of the Ducati World Premiere. Only this time I got to ride the bike in advance and tell you all about the new Ducati Multistrada V4 Grand Tour. V4S Grand Tour to be exact. And at the end of the video, I'll also answer the question of whether and how well the Ducati is prepared for the BMW R 1300 GS. So stay tuned. Ducati almost let an anniversary slip by this year. The first Multistrada was presented 20 years ago and an incredible 150,000 have been sold since then. It has to be said that 100,000 Multistrada models were sold up to 2019 and almost 50,000 from then on. And Ducati itself has said that the V4 was the biggest step they have taken and more of these 50,000 were sold. More on the V4 than on the Multistrada V2. So it's an extremely important vehicle for Ducati. It's basically the case that the touring duo market is currently booming. And now, before the really big competition, the BMW R 1300 GS is presented in October. They have put on another big show here. The Multistrada V4S Grand Tour really leaves nothing to be desired. What do I mean by that? It really has everything you can order from Ducati for the Multistrada. We have the luggage as standard, the main stand as standard, we have the fuel tank cap without a key, we have distance radar, we have the blind spot detector, so we really have the full range of equipment. We also have LED fog lights at the front and this special paint finish, which was also used for the Multistrada 1260 GT back then. We also have the heated seat for rider and passenger, so it really has everything here. And perhaps the price is right up front because you can imagine that if you pack everything into it, it's not cheap, but Ducati offers it in Germany for 26,690 euros and compared to the Multistrada V4S at 23,290 euros, that's a surcharge of just over 3,000 euros. But if you pack everything into the Multistrada V4S that is already standard here, I forgot the tire pressure sensor by the way, which is already included, then you save 700 euros if you opt for this package. Ducati promises that the side cases here Grand Tour will fit 60 liters. That's enough storage capacity for a trip, a few days for one person, I think. If you want even more, there is also a top case in the rear as an accessory, and there are also tank backpack solutions. Another new feature for 2024 is the compartment in the tank, which is now ventilated, as we already know it from the V4 Rally. The background to this is that Ducati uses two apps for connectivity, which must run in parallel and have the screen activated. This means that the cell phone that is in there, especially when it is being charged, tends to heat up a lot. A solution is already being worked on in parallel to ensure that it also works when the screen is turned off. But this ventilation is now available as an interim solution. Speaking of ventilation, there is also news about the winglets for 2024. I call the winglets on the Multistrada actually windlets because I don't think they generate so much wind, but rather so much air, really downforce, but they let the wind flow onto the legs, which is of course very pleasant in temperatures like we had this morning and are having again now around 30 degrees. However, when it's cold, this can also lead to moisture and cool air getting to your legs, especially when it's raining. That's why there is now a mechanism that we already know from the V4 Rally. There are now air vents in the winglets that you can close, which significantly reduces the draft that reaches the legs. And I tried it out on the highway. I closed it on the left and left it open on the right. There really is a noticeable difference because the V4 engine still generates a lot of heat. But they've basically taken countermeasures here because now, as you can see on the left and right side, there's a lot more protection, plastic covers to get the heat under control a bit. I've already said that it wasn't as hot as it is now the whole time we were on the ride. Cooling down has been good for us because I'm sweating on my shirt again now. But it's not so bad. The bamboo fiber regulates the smell quite well. So we had a much lower temperature because it started to rain. And that was quite interesting because, as I said, the Grand Touring is basically no different from the V4S in technical terms. So riding in the wet was something new to me. The Pirelli Scorpion Trail 2, which is mounted here, works very well. And what was also nice to see was how advanced the electronics are tuned. So there really is a lot of wheel slip because the roads weren't always perfect. But the electronics regulate it so well that you really don't notice it. Otherwise, the Grand Tour is still different. We have black pillion footrests, handlebar swing arm, and handlebar mounts. Incidentally, this is no longer based on rubber mounts for 2024. This means that Ducati is expecting something more from it, even more agility, even more handling advantages. I was able to confirm this here. The Multi is really super nimble, but I have to say, you can feel the vibrations in the handlebars a bit more. I noticed when I mounted the GoPro on the mirror that it was shaking a lot. It's okay in your hands, but on longer rides, for example, on the highway, you can feel the vibration level a little higher than with the previous models. Speaking of previous models, all the software features, and I forgot one more, concerning the suspension, there is now this minimal preload function already familiar from the Multi V4 Rally. You simply press and hold the suspension button on the left and the vehicle lowers to the minimum preload. This helps, for example, if you want to load the vehicle on the main stand. This is easy to do by hand with this function, and shorter people in particular who may not be able to cope with the seat height of at least 840 millimeters or 860 millimeters here on the Multistrada will find it a little easier. Anyone wondering what the weight of all this stuff is, the fog lights and the main stand weigh 2.2 kilos. I don't know the cases right now, but it's the same as normal for the V4S. So the additional weight of 2 kilograms is quite manageable. Otherwise, because we rode in the rain today, I can say that the wind and weather protection on the vehicle is really excellent. The adjustable wind and weather protection on the vehicle is really excellent. The adjustable windscreen and also the width of the front half to then really keep a lot of rain off the rider. I didn't have any rain protection with me today and rode with my Modica leather jacket, but it went well. It didn't rain for too long. I got dry again relatively quickly, or rather my upper body didn't have to dry at all because it didn't get wet in the first place. But now to the forecast, and of course I'm getting a bit ahead of myself because I don't know the R1300 GS yet, but nonetheless, with the Multistrada, Ducati currently has the best large enduro bike on the market for me. And now, of course, it's exciting to see whether it will remain that way this year. And I would ask you to let me know in the comments whether I am wrong, whether you are on my side, or how you see it. I would like to start with the engine. The Multistrada V4 is powered by this 170 horsepower V4 engine. We have 125 Newton meters of maximum torque. And compared to the current GS, which I can already pull, it's just that it has perhaps a little less power at low revs. But this dynamic revving that the V4 makes possible is still the best that is possible in the class for me. Of course, it's a bit absurd to ride an adventure bike like that. And I thought at first, as I got the invitation, Ducati Multistrada Grand Tour, maybe there will be a 17-inch version here for those who want to go touring on the road, so to speak. But no, it's stuck at 19 inches. And I have to say, it also rides very harmoniously. So you don't notice the 17 inches. The next topic I would like to shed light on, GS versus Multi, is the brakes. On the Multistrada V4 here, we have this 330 milliliter double disc at the front, a brake booster, and it really brakes almost like a super bike. It's not quite as good on the rear tire. The braking power is significantly lower there, but at the front, I can really brake into the corners. It's incredibly agile, and that's where BMW is so far. I can't get to where the Ducati was. As you know from the BMW GS, the brakes are such an in-house development. Sometimes it comes from America, sometimes from Asia. They supply them for the GS models. This is where Ducati comes in, and that's why the price is justified from my point of view on the premium goods. And I believe that the Multistrada will also be part of this chapter, And then we will, of course, make a comparison as soon as we have the GS in the house and as soon as we get our hands on a Multi V4. That will then be available at 1000 PS. Let's move on to the next chapter, consumption. This is an issue where the Multi has always had a hard time. It is said to be quite thirsty, and again today. Because of the weather, it was around Bologna where we were riding. By the way, these are the official Ducati test routes where the Multistrada was developed, which we rode here today. I have, of course, tracked the road with Kalimoto, so you can ride the route if you're ever in the area. It really is unbelievable. You have everything here, from racetrack like asphalt to wide bends and very tight ones. We've also had real rumble roads where the suspension has really come out of its shell, so it was really great. And with this whole mix, the Ducati Multistrada has now achieved a fuel consumption of 6.8 liters according to the display. And that's despite the fact that I was riding alone and that we didn't accelerate as much today as we usually do at presentations. The BMW is certainly ahead because they are simply very modest with their thirst from the experience of the Boxers, and that will also be the case with the new generation. One topic that is becoming increasingly important for large touring enduros, and where the manufacturers also want to show what they can do, is the topic of electronics and features. And here you really have to say that Ducati is at an incredibly high level. With the Multistrada V4S, this cruise control, we were able to try it out on the highway yesterday, works really well. Driving out of Bologna in 10-mile rush hour traffic. Takes between 90 and 110 kilometers per hour. You simply adjust it, it brakes for you, it accelerates for you. The only thing I have to say is that I think if I drove manually, I could keep the consumption lower, because of course this system can't look ahead. That means there's more brakes and acceleration than if I drive myself. But on the other hand, it is of course much less stressful, because I simply set the cruise control and it regulates itself. The fact that blind spot assist is included here also helps to reduce fatigue, and I don't have to keep turning my head when I want to start an overtaking maneuver. It warns me with continuous lighting when a vehicle is in my blind spot, and when the vehicle approaches or starts to overtake, it flashes. So it really is a very sophisticated system and helps to reduce rider tiredness on lengthy journeys, which this bike is clearly designed for. And in that respect, it's a great safety feature. BMW will now have to show whether they can manage this so well. There is a distance retainer in other model series, which I have already been able to test, but the feature has not yet been included in the GS. I'm sure it will come. And while we're on the subject of electronics, the light should also be mentioned here, because here on the V4 we have the LEDs, the fog lights, which really provide incredible lighting. I enjoyed this yesterday on the drive from Bologna to our hotel at night, just 60 kilometers of highway. How much this is lighted up the front. Of course, I'm curious to see whether this laser light will come from BMW, whether it will be standard on the GS or only optional, time will tell. But in any case, Ducati has set the bar pretty damn high when it comes to electronics and lighting, and I'm curious to see whether BMW will be able to surpass it. Then, of course, there is the issue of service intervals. And here Ducati has generally switched to very lengthy service intervals. With the V4, we only have valve clearance every 60,000 kilometers. That really is an incredible number. BMW, on the other hand, has the cardan drive, which of course requires less maintenance while we rely on a chain here. So here I would say it's very even. Let's see what comes next. The last chapter that I have written down and that you like to criticize, that doesn't come up enough in our tests, is the topic of reliability. And I have to say that this is partly due to the fact that we can't do such long-term test bikes. But the Motorrad magazine has just put the Multi V4S through its long-term test bike and has already covered over 50,000 kilometers with it. And so far, I think only one rear wheel bearing has been damaged, and other with the normal annual service and wearing parts have been replaced. And BMW still has to show whether they are as reliable, whether they can manage it, as well as Ducati with the Multi V4, which was also a first-time launch. So I hope I've given you a good introduction to the Ducati Multistrada V4S in the Grand Touring version. I hope you'll stay tuned for the first BMW versus Ducati test for the 2024 title. If you don't want to miss it, subscribe to the channel now. And apart from that, there's not much left for me to do, except thank you for your attention and say goodbye from the beautiful northern Italian mountains. Ciao!